Let's take a look at a couple of tools I think you're going to use a lot, particularly when you're first getting started with Photoshop. One of those is the select subject command. You got a taste of this command in an earlier movie where I went to the select menu and chose subject and applied this feature that way. I'd like to show you another way to apply it that makes it even more powerful. If you go to the toolbar and go down to this tool slot and press, you can choose any one of these three selection tools: Object Selection, Quick Selection, or Magic Wand. I'll go with Quick Selection tool. No matter which of those three you select, in the options bar, you'll find a Select Subject button. And this is the other way to access the Select Subject command. If I were to just click on this button like this, the button would do exactly what the Select Subject menu command would do. It would cause Photoshop to take a look at the image and figure out what the main subject is and put a selection around that. And you see it's done that here. So that's pretty wonderful in itself. But sometimes you may not get exactly the result you wanted. So when that happens, I suggest you try this instead. I'm going to press Command D, Control D on Windows to deselect, and this time I'm going to click this down-facing arrow to the right of the Select Subject button, which is here in the latest version of Photoshop that I'm using to record. Here you have a choice of having Photoshop analyze the image on your device, in other words, on your computer, or in the cloud. And when it analyzes it in the cloud, sometimes it does a better or more precise job of selecting. So let's try that on this image. I'll choose Cloud, and then I'll go over and click the Select Subject button. It may take a minute, but notice that this time, Photoshop got more precise and selected just the butterfly as the main subject in this image. And that's exactly what I wanted. So let's do something with this selection. How about changing its color? I'll go to the Edit menu and I'll choose Fill, which is one of several ways to change color in Photoshop. I'll fill this selection with the foreground color, which just happens to be blue in my case. Yours may be different. And I've set the blending mode for this fill to color, which will allow the butterfly to show through the color so we don't just get a big solid fill of blue on top of the butterfly. You can see what I mean when I click OK, and there's the result. So this is a great tool to use when you have a main subject in an image. But what if you have a lot of objects in an image? There's another tool you may want to try, and that's the Object Selection tool. Let's switch to another photo that has a lot of objects in it. This is the perfect situation for using the Object Selection tool when you want to work on just one of multiple objects that are in an image, or maybe even just part of an object that has little objects inside of it. You'll see what I mean in a moment. In the toolbar, I'll go back to the same tool slot we just used, press and hold, and choose the Object Selection tool. As soon as you choose this tool, you may see this little wheel spinning like this. And that means that Photoshop is analyzing the image to identify what it thinks are the objects in the image so that it can help you to select those. Now, if I move into the image and say that I hover over this little shell, you'll see a magenta outline around it and a translucent magenta overlay on it. And that means that Photoshop has identified it as an object. So all I have to do to select it now is to click on it and then move away, and there's a selection around just that object. Now, all I need to do is work on it. Maybe I want to change its color or make it darker. But for now, let's try this with some other objects in this image. If I go up to the camera, you can see that Photoshop thinks this is an object. But if I hover over just the camera lens, Photoshop thinks this is an object too. So it would help me to select this area too. Sometimes the Object Selection tool doesn't recognize something as an object. So here's an example, this photo here. If I hover over it, it doesn't light up in magenta. That's okay, I can still make great use of the Object Selection tool to select it. Notice that in the Mode menu in the Options bar, Photoshop is telling us that we can use a rectangular selection to try to select this object. So I'll come in and click just outside of one of the corners of this rectangular object and drag over it. And you can use this even if an object isn't a perfect rectangle. And when I release my mouse, Photoshop has made a selection of that picture. As is sometimes the case, not everything gets selected that you want, but that's okay because you know how to add to a selection with any selection tool. You can either go up to the options bar and click on this add to selection icon, or this is the way I like to do it, hold down the shift key on your keyboard and drag over that area that you want to add to the selection. And now the object selection tool has helped you to select just that part of this image. So now let's do something to that selection. How about making a copy of it? I'll press Command J on my keyboard. That's Control J on a Windows keyboard. And you can see in the Layers panel that there's now a new layer with just that picture on it. And if you go to the toolbar and get the Move tool, you can click and drag, and you'll be able to see that copy, which was right on top of the original, so we didn't see it at first. And drag it down where you want it in the image, maybe down here. So that's a look at the Select Subject command and the Object Selection tool, which I think you're really going to enjoy using in Photoshop.